Hi there. Okay, welcome to Introduction to Foraging. It's 2 o'clock. I'm going to assume everyone who needs to be here is here. If you've got any comments, can you leave them down in the comment box, which I'm able to read. I hope, fingers crossed, that everyone can hear me talking now. If so, I'll just start. Okay, so my name's Will Goodwin. I'm going to be running the Introduction to Foraging course. I thought I'd just explain a little bit about me. Okay, so for the last 10 years, I've been into foraging. From that, I basically developed a number of different skills that aren't really related to foraging, but are very similar. So lots of bushcraft, lots of craft. I'm into cordage. I'm into medicinal uses for plants. I work in education normally. This is like a side job for me, but something I'd like to take further. Now, I live in the northwest of England. I'm not sure where everyone else is located, but a lot of the plants and stuff that I'm going to be talking about will be found in the northwest of England. But I'll talk about that later on in the presentation. So basically, what's going to happen is I'm going to run through each of the points on the PowerPoint. So I've talked about me. I'm going to have a brief look at what is foraging and what isn't foraging. Some of the reasons why you might be interested in foraging. What you're likely to find. I know we're in one of the coldest months of the year. There's ice outside wherever I look, but there are still plants that you can find to eat, even in this cold climate. We're going to look at some equipment you might need. Some of the rules that foragers themselves use, some of the things that you need to be aware of. Again, we'll look at the law and how foraging fits in. I'm going to show you some of the books that I recommend that you use, and then we're going to jump straight in and have a look at the plants, some of the plants that you can go out and find. Now, I've broken the plants down. Just we're going further, but I'll just explain now. There's genetic plants. These are plants that are available all year round, and it just so happens you'll also find them in February. I've done some of the plants that you might find if you've got a garden or a yard. Hopefully, after this presentation, you'll be able to go out in your own garden and identify some edible plants. And then we're going to look at plants that specifically are available in February. Okay, so what is foraging? So foraging is basically another term for hunter-gathering. So prior to 30,000 years ago, all humans were hunter-gatherers. If you were hungry, you'd go out and forage, collect berries, nuts, and plants and animals from in the wild. And that is what foraging is. Unfortunately, foraging isn't bushcraft. It isn't craft. It isn't making stuff. It's about only collecting plants and resources to consume, to eat. Okay. So killing animals, which you're not allowed to do anymore. Hunting for plants, nuts, and berries. That's all considered foraging. Okay, so why would anyone even be interested in foraging? Well, I'll tell you, 10 years ago, someone bought me an introduction to foraging book. They knew that I liked to go out and pick blackberries. I used to go out and pick blackberries all the time, certainly when I was a student, and they bought me this book. And basically, my interest exploded from the point of that book. I went out, picked out a few of the plants, and my knowledge has grown and grown and grown. So 10 years ago, I started out with one book. I've now got a bookcase with 200 books relating to foraging in. I'm always collecting and I'm always learning. One of the great things about foraging and UK native plants is there's always so much to learn. There's always different ways that can be used, different plants that you can eat, and different recipes that come out all the time. So that is why you might forage. And another reason you might forage is it gets you outside. For me, it's a hobby that's outside. So when I'm walking the children to school, I can maybe have a little forage on the side. When I'm going to the shops, I keep my eyes to the floor in case there's any plants grown locally. So it's an outdoor hobby for me, okay, which means I get lots of sunlight, lots of fresh air, but it also is a way of, personally, for me to engage with my own children. So I know my grandparents, for example, knew all of this stuff already. You asked them about plants, they already knew, but all that information has been lost. Hopefully I can re-educate my own children and all the people I know that all this knowledge can be brought to the fore again. So, so what are you likely to find when we go foraging? I know we're in February and the grass is, everywhere's frosty. But for me, foraging is about supplementing your diet. Okay, now I still go to the supermarket and buy processed food and that, but what I do is I'll forage like an additional vegetable for the meal, or I'll make something from that I've foraged. So I'm not like hunter gatherer living on the land. I'm still a 21st century person, but I use foraging to supplement my diet. One of the things with foraging is most of the time what you're foraging is weeds. And for the life of you, if you've ever had a garden or allotment, they can be difficult to eradicate. Now, if you imagine all the time and effort spent to try and grow carrots or to grow vegetables, when in reality we could just go and pick all the weeds that were growing in between all the vegetables and we'd have an additional crop. So the things that you can find are, generally for foraging, is we'll have leaves that will be considered to be a spinach alternative. So a lot of the plants that you can eat, they'll have a green texture that tastes similar to spinach. Okay, so if you like spinach, foraging could be a way to get a cheaper version of spinach. There's also going to be berries to eat. Some of the berries can be eaten fresh, for example, blackberries. Some of them are quite raw and stringent and maybe better in a jam or in a sauce of some sort, but they are still edible. There's going to be roots that you can eat. A good example of this is burdock. If you've ever remember the children's drink of dandelion and burdock, these were two roots that were used to produce a drink. The roots were full of starch, so obviously that helped with the drink and possibly the alcoholic content that it contained. But that was an old drink that we used to have: dandelion root and burdock root. So in terms of foods we're able to find, plants provide roots. What you'll need to know is that in general, it's illegal to dig up a plant and take the root unless you've got the landowner's permission. Okay. Even for things like dandelion, which could be considered an invasive weed, a field full of them, it's still technically illegal to dig up the dandelion and consume the root. Now, if you were to be caught and you had a bunch of dandelion roots in your hand, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't be prosecuted because you'd be doing them a favor, but that's where the law stands. Okay, so plants can provide us with leaves. Generally, they taste similar to spinach. That's how they're compared. We've got roots that can be eaten. We've got herbs. Herbs are basically plants that provide flavor. So if you imagine like basil and thyme, they're herbs while still a plant. So there's plants that provide flavoring. Sweet cicely would be one. It's got a fennel sort of aniseedy taste. Foraging can also provide us with spices. A lot of the different plants that we eat, you'll find that the seeds have like a similar taste, but a bit more spicier. So, for example, hogweed seeds can be used as a spice. Alexander seeds could be used as a spice. And flowers. You can also eat flowers. As a general rule, you shouldn't really be picking. You shouldn't really go foraging just for flowers because, in effect, you're stunting the plant's ability to reproduce. The flowers would have yet to produce any seeds. But it, depending on the variety, depends on the sort of crops that you can go and pick the flowers for. Okay, so what equipment are you needed? Now, I've been foraging for the last 10 years, and I am a bit of a lazy forager. I don't take any equipment out with me whatsoever. Maybe a bag to carry them in. Now, because I do craft and stuff, I'm generally used to the wildlife, so gloves aren't really necessary for me. But if you're getting introduced to foraging, I suggest maybe you take a few bags. Certainly in supermarkets at the moment, they've started selling these plastic like cloth bags, so that you put your fruit in it and it allows the fruit to breathe. They cost maybe 30p each. These are really good for foraging, certainly along the coastal. So you can put your stuff in, you can see it without opening the bag, and there's air holes to keep everything from going off and mouldy while you're collecting it. But ideally, what you need is decent shoes and clothing. It can normally get quite cold. a bag to put your forage goods in, and gloves if you're so inclined. But that is basically it. It's one of the hobbies that if you want to, you can spend a lot of money, but you don't need to. You can buy loads of equipment, but it's unneeded. For example, I'm constantly foraging. When I'm taking, as I said, when I'm taking the children to school, I just like to have a little browse around, and if I see something worth eating, then I normally eat it on the spot or collect it up in a bag that I've brought. But that's it. Okay, so right, the law. You don't have to bother reading this, and it is quite complex. What I'll do is I'll just condense it all down for you. So basically, in terms of foraging, all the land is owned by somebody. So wherever you are, whatever bit of land you're on, it's generally owned by someone. Everything I'm going to explain to you is just for England and Wales. In Scotland, they have different rules. Okay, so there's basically 4 laws you need to be aware of. There's 1968 Theft Act, which prohibits collecting wild plants for monetary value. There's the Wildlife Country Theft Act and the Weed Act. Basically, I'll condense it all down for you. On all public land, you have an inbuilt right to forage, so long as you're foraging for yourself. For example, you can go out and you can collect dandelion leaves and make a meal from them. It only becomes unlawful if you were to then sell what you've collected. So, for example, if you were to make a pie with your dandelion leaves and then sell that, in effect, you would be breaking the law. Similarly, if you were to collect mushrooms and go to a local restaurant and sell them on, you would be breaking the law. The only way you're not going to break the law is if you've got the landowner's permission. So, for example, if you were to forage in your own garden, you've got full rights, so you can dig up roots, pick flowers, and do that. Everywhere else, it's only on public land that you're allowed to gather wild plants. So this is parks, footways, cycle paths, the general street is considered public land. Okay, so that said, as I explained before, one of the laws is that you're not allowed to dig up roots of a plant. So in effect, you would be killing the plant anyway. So it's against the law to dig up the root. There's also a number of plants that are protected in Schedule 8. These are listed as becoming rarer in society, so they've got a protective status. And there's also plants in Schedule 9. These are invasive plants that have started to become naturalized, but are still unwanted. So I suppose a good example of this would be Japanese knotweed that you hear about in the news a lot. Okay, this is an invasive plant that's now naturalized within the UK. As it stands, it's actually edible, but I wouldn't suggest that you start eating Japanese knotweed, if only for the fact that councils like to poison them a lot. So you need to be very careful about eating something that's possibly had poison put on it in the past. But anyway, so there's plants like this that are naturalized but are unwanted. You've got to be careful. So, for example, it's against the law to pick and spread Japanese knotweed about. So, in fairness, you could forage it to eat it, but you still need to be really careful. Right. So, hopefully, this hasn't put you off foraging. Foraging laws. Yeah. So, listen, you're going to start foraging. I started out with one book when I first started foraging, and it's obviously ballooned since then. What I've noticed is what I've noticed, these are the books that I would personally recommend people buy. So in the bottom left-hand corner, we've got The Food for Free by Richard Mabey. You see the little one next to it with the black currants on. That's like the pocket edition. That was the book that I got 10 years ago, and you can probably see the quality of it is not very good. Richard Mabey is somewhat of an expert on foraged foods. He's done loads of different books on loads of different subjects, and they're well worth reading. In terms of introduction to foraging, this Food for Free book that he's done is a classic. Now, what I'm going to suggest is that the full book that he's done, the bigger one in the picture, the Life Financing Classic, contains just a few additional foodstuffs that the smaller book doesn't contain. I'd suggest you just go for the smaller book. Okay, don't bother buying the bigger book until you're comfortable with a smaller book. Okay, the little pocket Collins Gem Food for Free book is perfect to start you off. Okay, someone have asked me, so some of the other books I read, in the top right hand corner, the blue book, Collins Complete Guide to British Wildflowers. Jokingly on the front it says, an ideal first flower guide. Maybe not, but it is pretty good for identifying plants based on the picture. Obviously, as you progress and you learn more about the plants that you can eat, there's different ways to identify them. For example, you can look at the way that they're built and the way that the leaves and petals and sepals are designed, or for basics, you can look at the picture, and if the picture looks very similar, then you've got a better idea. Now, obviously, this book is just wildflowers and doesn't say whether it's edible or not. But what it will do, I don't know if you can see it on the other picture, it has a little picture of a map which tells you roughly where in the country you'll find it. Now, the reason I'm saying this is a lot of books that you'll get do edibles throughout the whole of the UK. But one of the issues I've found is that different areas of the UK will have different types of plants. So, for example, plants that are common down in the southern districts of England, plants that are common there might not be very common up north where I live. For example, I live on a coastal town, so a lot of the coastal edibles I'll be able to find, but maybe someone from Birmingham wouldn't have access to that same range of plants. So what you need to be careful in terms of buying a book is whether the plants in it are going to be ones that you can find in your local area. I suppose an easy way of saying this is there's like microclimates. So I've noticed that when I'm in blackberry season, my friends in southern Wales have yet to start their blackberries. It's like they're delayed by a couple of weeks. So by this, when blackberries finish for me, they're doing really good in Wales. So there's like a time delay, if you want, a microcosm, microclimate for different pockets and different areas within the UK. And these things you need to be aware of. So in terms of books, I recommend you get the little pocket guide Food for Free by Richard Mabey, classic, and maybe something like the Collins British Wildflower book with pictures in. Okay, another some great ones. Other ones is the top left-hand corner, the River Cottage Handbook. So there's 10 different books. They're really good. The author, John Wright, he's a well-known forager who also writes a lot of books like Richard Mabey. So any books by John Wright, you're going to be getting the best knowledge possible. Another great name in terms of foraging is Roger Phillips. So if you have a look at the Wildflowers of Britain on the page, again, this is a bit like the Collins book in that you open the book up and there's just physical pictures of plants, but there's loads of recipes. Roger Phillips normally has lots of recipes in his. John Wright's got a few, and that's a really good book for visual identification of plants. And finally, at the bottom right hand corner, the Wildflower of Britain and Northern Europe by the Fitters. So if you look at the names down the bottom, Richard Fitter and Alex the Fitter, these were well-known people in the past. I don't think they've been doing books as of late. But if you have a look at the book, this book's a little bit more detailed. The pictures aren't as good, but you basically there's a lot more species covered. So there's just shy of 1,500 plants within that one book. So together, in theory, you should use these books to help you identify edible plants. Now, it's unfortunate. I still do. I run the Liverpool and Northwest foraging group on Facebook, and what we do is I'd go out weekly or monthly, and we'd go out foraging. It's just a shame that we're not able to do that at the moment, and you will be relying on books. Oh, broken it already. Okay, so let's just jump straight in and get on with plants and things that we can find to eat. So what I've done is, oh my God, sorry about this. So first off, I've listed 7 plants that you'll find all year round. You may not have considered them to be edible, but they're all edibles. I'll give you a quick list of them, and I'll go through each one of them individually. So we've got nettles, really nice edible. We've got dandelion, edible. Clover, daisy, chickweed, ground elder, and sorrel. Each of these 7 plants will be found anywhere in the UK at any time during the year. Obviously, while dandelions are out at the moment, they're not as prolific as they would be in the summer, but they are still to be found. So let's have a quick look. Nettles grow everywhere. Very easy to identify, if only because they sting you. There's 2 different types, the small leaves and the normal. They're considered both the same. Normally, when we'd eat them, we'd pick off just the top shoot. So as you can see in the pictures, if you were to hold the top bit and just snip underneath, that would be considered the best bit of the plant. For foraging, what you'll find is, as in lots of things in life, the younger plant is the more tasty. The older plant can be a bit tougher. Okay, so what you're after is the young shoots on nettles. Nettles are a powerhouse of minerals and vitamins and nutrients. They go on at the highest protein levels for a plant. And so if I was ever to live off the land and become a hunter-gatherer again, nettle would be part of my main meals that I'd eat. Probably eat nettles as much as I could for the protein and for all the vitamins and minerals. There is an issue where as the plants go older, you're not supposed to eat them. But what you'll find is there'll always be different nettles from different stages growing around. And if you were so inclined, you could hack down an older plant and you'll find that it'll grow new shoots that you could eat. It's generally not an issue. So nettles are a good one. If you were to come on one of my foraging walks, I'll show you the process of how you can eat nettles without being stung. But in general, if you were to heat up the leaf, if you were to boil the leaf, submerge it in hot water, or pass it over the flame, you'll find that the stingers go away and you can then eat the plant. Okay, dandelion, classic, everyone should be aware of. The whole of the plant is edible and full of vitamin A, C, K, loads of minerals, considering it's just a weed plant. There's loads of different varieties. You'll see down on the picture on the left, the leaves on this one are quite serrated. There'll be any variety of leaf for the dandelion. Some of them will be serrated, some of them will be quite rounded. There's so many different varieties, but they're all generally look the same. So things with dandelion, when I'm out with the girls, I'll pick, so my children, I'll pick just the flower heads off and eat them myself. The leaves can be eaten. The greener leaves have a stronger taste. There was what they used to do in the past was blanch them, so they'd cover the plant up over the winter, and the leaves wouldn't turn green, and they'll have more flavour. But I found the whole plant acceptable, even quite nice to eat at times. The root is full of inulin, if you're so inclined, and that can be eaten, fried up and eaten. And you'll still find dandelions all year round. Someone once said to me, we shouldn't be eating plants that have a milky sap. For example, if you were to pull the flower head off the stalk on the dandelion, there's like a white latex that comes out. As a general rule, that doesn't count. Okay, there's a few plants like dandelion that have the sap that are edible. So don't be confused by these rules. Don't eat, like, for example, someone once told me you can't eat red berries or something. That, just ignore all that. You're best off knowing what plant you can eat and what plant you can't, rather than relying on some folklore to get around it. So dandelions, as I was explaining before, if you take the root, mix it with burdock, you can make dandelion and burdock. Unfortunately, it doesn't taste as nice as the ones bought from the shop, but it's still okay. And coffee as well. I've yet to try it. Someone said you can make a really good coffee substitute with dandelion. So until they stop selling coffee in the shops, I won't be trying it. Okay, so another one that you'll find. So, for example, we've got a sports field next to me, and there's dandelions growing, and there's some nettles along the edge. But a lot of the plants there is also clover. There's 2 general types that we'll find in the UK. There's the red one and the white one. They look very similar. You generally only identify them by the pattern on the leaf and the colour of the flower. The flower head there is actually a collection of multiple flower heads. So if you were to eat a clover flower in spring or summer, it tastes quite sweet because of the individual pockets of nectar within it. The plant itself is also high in protein. It doesn't taste great, but it doesn't taste disgusting. And I think for foraging, the fact that it tastes okay is good enough. Okay, so clover grows everywhere. You can eat the flower head, you can eat the stalk. This is used as a green manure planted by farmers, so it's grown everywhere. Animals use it for crops, and so humans can as well. So clover is a good one, always dotted around, always worth picking. And daisy. Now, I was surprised to find daisies still in flower in this cold weather, but they're out on the field as we speak. This picture's from that. So daisies, you've seen these in sports field. Generally, daisy and most of its family are all edibles. So, for example, again, when I'm picking the dandelion flower heads, I'll pick daisy ones as well. They taste all right. There's nothing special with them, but they're still edible and still tasty. So, for example, you can sprinkle the flower heads on salads, or eat it after you've made your daisy chain with the children. So daisy is always a good one to be found everywhere. Okay, and the next one is chickweed. This, for some reason, this seems to be growing everywhere out and about in Liverpool at the moment, more so than usual. So chickweed's a low-growing plant that has these little white flowers on. And I haven't shown you in the picture, but if you were to take one of the stalks with the leaves on, you'll see one line of hairs along just one side of it. And that's an additional way of knowing chickweed. Really, though, the plant itself, there isn't any other plants that look like it that are inedible. There's a similar one called mouse ear, which is very similar to chickweed, but it's fairier. So as I said before, there's one line of hairs on the stalk for chickweed. On mouse ear, there's hairs all the way around. But the plant itself looks a bit more hairy. That is edible. I don't think it tastes as nice as chickweed. Chickweed's considered like a spring tonic. So if you were to find some in spring, crush it up, add it to a drink, and you drink that to help get your body, purge all the toxins for your body and get ready for spring. So chickweed is really good. If you see it and you're out and about, by all means, as long as you're comfortable about where it's being found, have a taste. Have a taste of it. It does get a bit stringy, but it's really nice. It's like a bit of a salad vegetable. Okay, now ground elder. If you've got a garden or an allotment, this is probably a weed that you've been trying to get rid of, but it's actually a really tasty edible. Okay, so ground elder, it's so called because the leaves look very similar to the elder tree, but that's about the only similarity there is. This is an invasive plant that spreads via roots. Unfortunately, I haven't got any in my garden, but I'd like some. And what you can do is you can just pick off the leaves and either eat them raw, they've got a distinct taste, or I like to just maybe steam them and have them as an additional vegetable, as a spinach substitute. Okay, so ground elder isn't as common as you find all the daisies or the dandelions, but when you do find it, it'll be prolific. So you'll never just find one little bit, you'll find lots of it. And similar for all the other foodstuffs I've mentioned, they grow in so much abundance, you should never be fearful about picking too many, and certainly ground elder, because people try and get rid of it. It's got a real distinct, nice taste to it. It also holds its shape well when it's cooked, which is good. And sorrel, this is one of my children's favourites. You notice the arrow-shaped leaf is one way to identify it. And these have like a sharp citrusy taste, a bit like a lemon taste. My children love it, and whenever we find it, they're straight to it, and it's like a firm thing. It must be the children like sour sweets and sour foods that they like this. So yeah, sorry, someone said, is chickweed edible flowers? The whole of the plant is edible. Normally, if I was eating chickweed, I wouldn't be bothered about picking the flowers. I just eat it all in one go. So sorrel is the good one. And certainly in terms of flavour, an interesting flavour, one that can be shared. A lot of people like sorrel. There should be no reason why you don't. Oops. Okay, so nettle, dandelion, clover, daisy, chickweed, ground elder, and sorrel, they can be found throughout the year. Here's some species that you'll find are linked to just February. Okay, so something that comes out in the winter months, January and February, is sow thistle. There's two varieties, prickly sow thistle and broadleaf sow thistle, I think. Both of them are treated exactly the same. You'll see from the flower, it looks very similar. The flower certainly does to dandelion, but the rest of the plant doesn't. And even though it's called prickly, the picture on there is prickly. They're not that prickly. This isn't like a thistle. These are prickles that dissolve when they're cooked, or you could probably chew past them. So the whole plant itself is edible. The stems can be a little bit tough to eat, but generally you want to be eating the flower heads and the leaves. You could cook this up similar to spinach. Sorry for going on about it so much. You can steam up. Sometimes I like to just nibble on the plant raw when I'm out and about, but this seems to do really, really well in the winter months. So while a lot of plants are dying off, sow thistles coming out in full force. So feel free to eat and eat and eat as much sow thistle you want. Yeah, the flavour and taste isn't amazing, but when it's cooked up, it's more than acceptable. Okay, now this is one of my favourites, hairy bittercress. I'll set a challenge to anyone to tell me that they don't have hairy bittercress growing somewhere in the outside space, if you've got one, a yard or in a garden. Okay, this is basically it's like cress. It's got that mustardy cress taste to it. The whole plant can be eaten. So if you have a look on the screen, the picture in the bottom left hand corner, what I do is I would grab the base of the plant and twist it out, pull the roots off, and just eat the whole plant like that. Break it up, put it onto a salad. The flowers are edible. Hairy bittercress is everywhere, and it's a lovely like winter surprise. It's one of the few plants that you'll see and you can eat straight away when you're out and about in winter. So hairy bittercress, if you haven't got hairy bittercress, I'll be surprised. It does grow, it's in most of my pots I've got outside. So this is another one, oh crap, Oregon grape. Now I've listed this on here. Generally this is a plant that's been brought in by local councils. Okay, so it's been planted in parks. This one's on a roadside. But the great thing is the berries are edible. They also come out at a later time. So this picture here was taken in January, and you'll see the yellow things. They're the flowers on the plant, and each of the flowers will turn into a little purple berry. As you can see just on this one plant, there's going to be lots and lots of berries. Birds don't seem to eat them, and they are quite sour to taste, but they're edible. So if you like making jams, or you like making couliers or sauces, they're really good. And they're also a fruit that's available in the winter months when the majority of fruit isn't there. So I've put it on. It's not a native plant, but it's still edible. It grows a lot, and you'll see it in parks, as I said, in roadsides. And when the berries come out, you can eat them. Once you can identify Oregon grape, you'll see it everywhere. There isn't any other plant that looks like it for you to be confused with, basically. And I suggest you try the berries. They're not nice to start with, but they do get better. Trust me. So Oregon grape's a good one. Okay, and then garlic mustard. I've seen loads of this out at the moment. This should be listed in the plants that come out all year round. But I see most of it around January and February. So you might have seen the crinkly leaves. Very easy to identify. You basically take a leaf and crush it, hold it up to your nose, and it should smell of garlic, like a weak garlicky taste. Now, it would be nice to say that it tasted just like garlic, but it just smells like garlic. So what you're best doing is maybe cutting up the leaves and putting them on a salad. When it's cooked, it loses the very slight garlic flavour that it had. It's still an edible plant, but obviously it wouldn't taste like garlic when it's cooked. It's nice and solid, and it's nice to be munched on. Okay, it's growing about a lot. Also called Jack by the Hedge. So, oh, this other one. Sorry. Now, I was going to mention that as an introduction to foraging, you generally want to avoid mushrooms. Plants are pretty easy to identify once you've got a book in front of you. Things like mushrooms, it can be very difficult, and I normally shy away from them on my forage courses, just because I'm reluctant to show people something that they can then go away and identify. With plants, it's different. Apart from jelly ear mushrooms, now these are prolific around the winter times. It's called jelly ear because if you can see, it looks like the membrane around your ear. These grow on old trees, elder trees, privets. For example, this is an elder tree. So in some ways, you can identify both the mushroom and the tree at the same time. And this is one of the few mushrooms that I'll be willing to eat straight off the tree when I'm cooking. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to say they taste delicious. It's an acquired taste, but I don't mind it. It can be used in cooking. The Chinese use jelly a lot, but when we're out and about, it's nice to have a little nibble on. You'll see here, look, it's even frozen in this picture. It's not bothered by that. It thaws out and carries on growing. So jelly here. Okay, and to continue the theme, even though I've suggested you don't forage for mushrooms, there's two mushrooms as listed on the screen, velvet shank and oyster mushroom, that will only come out in the winter months, which is good because they'll be generally the only two mushrooms that you will see in frosty weather. Okay, so the top one on the far right, that's velvet shank. You can see it's got like darkened stems, and the picture underneath is the oyster mushroom. This was taken in the winter. So both of them will grow during a frosty period. All other mushrooms will have died out. So it's generally easy to identify based on that fact alone. So I was lucky with the picture of the tree that both varieties were growing on the one tree. Bumper crop for both. Oyster mushrooms are delicious. Velvet shank are delicious. Something to look out for. I'm not suggesting by any stretch of the imagination that you start foraging for mushrooms, but they're two that can be looked out during the winter months. That you've got a pretty good go at identifying them. Okay, so I've listed some plants that you'll find all year round. Hopefully you will have identified and you'll know about some. I've done some that you'll find in February, including the mushrooms. I thought I'd include this section because there's a couple of plants that grow in my garden and seem to grow in everyone else's garden in Liverpool. It turns out are edible. So the first one on the picture is called creeping bellflower. The pictures I've done here, it's growing out my wall in the back, in the front. It's still growing now amongst the snow. It has these lovely little blue flowers. The blue flowers themselves are edible, and you can use them in salads. Okay, it seems endemic in Liverpool. Every garden, every front garden has some of this growing in it. It's just so nice that it turns out to be edible. And another one, which is growing in my garden a lot, and I've seen it in everyone else's garden, is ivy-leaved toadflax. So it has these really distinct leaves. But I suppose an easy way of identifying it is it grows in walls. So, for example, I've got it growing in my old Victorian wall in the back garden. Now, this is an edible from the Mediterranean area originally. And the leaves, the whole plant can be eaten, basically. It has like a sharp taste, but it's still okay. So hopefully, fingers crossed, everyone who's on the live video now should be able to pop into their garden at a later date and hopefully spot whether you've got some ivy-leaved toadflax. If so, have a little nibble. The same for the creeping bellflower. If you're in Liverpool, I guarantee you've probably got them in your garden somewhere. Okay, so that is basically it. We've done seven genetic plants you'll find all year round. We've got a couple of garden varieties that I think most people should have in their garden, and I've done some varieties just for February. Now, what I did additional was, I know I've talked about books and and things. But there's also some good websites and apps that you can also use. So the first one is PFAF, Plants for Our Future. This is a website run by a guy called Ken Fern. Basically a god when it comes to foraging food. He's done a website that identifies whether plants are edible, and because it's based in the UK, you know that the information you're going to get is going to be top notch. So, for example, if you were to search for PFAF, go to the website and put the name of a plant in the search bar, for example, chickweed, it would come up, it would tell you how edible it is, things you can use, where it will grow. It's just great. I use this one for if I've seen a plant and I'm not sure if it's edible, I'll check it out on PFAF. Okay, so another website that I used I used to use in the past is called Fallen Fruit. Okay, this is basically a world map that allows individuals to locate on the map where they found edible food. Okay, so if you have a look on Fallen Fruit and go to the Liverpool area, you'll basically see all the places in Liverpool I've marked on with different types of edible food. Okay, so that's really good. It's really good, for example, if say you're searching for a type of plant, you can put it in there and it's quite possible there'll be a location with a picture to help you find it. Okay, and the third one, I'm not a big fan of using mobile phones when we're out and about, but it's iNaturalist. Okay, and what this does is allows you to record plants and insects that you've seen, but it's also got a bit of an identification function in there. So, for example, if you were to point at a clover, it would tell you that it was a clover. Now, the reason I don't mind recommending this is for every species that you put in and record, it gets added to a national database. So, in effect, they're keeping like a global record of where all the plants and animals are. So, it is quite good. It's good thing to get the kids involved in. Normally, though, for identification purposes, I'd suggest using a book. Right, so there's that. And that is basically it. Obviously, I've rushed through super quick, but if anyone's got any comments or questions, can you put them in the comments box and I'll answer them if I can, please. Yes. Yes. So, yes. Right, so yes, so what is it you'd like to pick? So,
You win.
yes, yes. Please. Right, well, thanks.